Okay, so as I say, you've got your printer all ready to go, and now you're ready to start printing. But first thing you need to do is make some printing files. So you've got your micro SD card. Remember, when you get an SD card, always format it. Was it FAT32? If you're using a Mac, you can go into disk utilities and do that, which is the one that looks like a little stethoscope on the disk. I've put that onto my home screen because it's hard to find sometimes. But anyway, so you formatted your card, and then you put it into your card reader. What I'm going to do is just check that is actually recognizing it. Yeah, so I can see that it's come up in the top right hand corner. So first things first, you're going to need software that is called splicing software, and basically what that does is it takes takes files called STL files. What are they? Let's have a look. What are STL files? So, STL files describe only the surface geometry of a three-dimensional object without any representation of color, texture, or other common CAD model attributes. So basically, the STL file is what you then can put into, it's like a 3D object that you can put into a splicer, and what splicers do is take that 3D object, and you imagine that the extruder has to do each layer individually, so a splicer cuts it into several layers and therefore translates that 3D object into a print that the printer can cope with. So that's what a splicer does in essence. The best one I found, so Creality do their own one, but a lot of people use Cura. I think actually Cura makes Creality software anyway. They're pretty much the same. Cura make their own type of 3D printers called the Ultimaker. Probably all much of a muchness, but basically if you search on Google Cura splicing software download, and then you come up to this page, and then you can download it for free. It's entirely free. You don't have to pay a subscription or anything. I'm not going to re-download it because I'm pretty sure my colleague David uses Microsoft, so it would be different. Anyway, so I've got Cura down here. You get this little box. I'm going to quit it so that maybe it might show you this, but yeah, double click on it and you open it up and it does its loading thing. Now when you first start the software, it will ask you for your printer type, and it will say whether it's a networked printer or a not networked, and that basically means, have you got your laptop, I think, connected to the printer, and that means you can control the printer directly through your laptop. I don't do that. I just use the SD card method. And then you pick which printer you have. So I've got two printers that I've put in here, but if I was to say add a printer, here we go. This is the same page. So add a printer. There is no printer found over your network. Fine. So I'm adding a non-networked printer. Actually, I think what it means is if you had a Wi-Fi box, you can get for these printer Wi-Fi boxes that then send the signal wirelessly over to your laptop. Anyway, so you can see there's loads of different printer models out there. What we're going to look for is Creality 3D, and then we're going to look for the Ender 5 Plus. The reason I don't use this software for my other printer is it doesn't actually list it on here, so I actually use Creality's own one for that printer on the other side, the CL5, but the Creality Ender 5 Plus is a very popular model, so it's in here. Right, so then you'd go to add, and then it would add it. I've already got it added, so I'm going to make sure I'm on it, and then you get this screen. So effectively you've got in here your it's a bit like your print bed, and when you are putting in the type of printer you've got, what it's doing is it will have settings for the bed sizes, so the diameter of the bed and how high it is. So that's how it does that. I do find this software a bit funny that you can sometimes end up elsewhere on the screen. Now when I'm using this, what I'm doing So you can scroll. If I try and show you, I'm scrolling in and out with the scroll, and then if you hold down the right key, ooh, hang on, maybe I have to do it with it. So if I right click and then just move, yeah, it drags it in these ways. I tried to do this with the mouse on the laptop, as in the tracking pad. You definitely want a mouse. You'll really struggle otherwise to do any of this kind of stuff. So then what I've got up here is just a bit of details about what material I'm using. Now when you go into here, you can actually pick the specific material that you're using. I really recommend using eSun, this one. I haven't actually got that hooked up to the printer at the moment. Sorry, David. I'm giving you some of the cheaper printer filament. Well, I don't know if it's cheaper or not. I don't know where it's from, but it's not eSun. But, you know, you can literally pick which ones you've got. But I'm just going to go, because I've got, I presume, a generic one in there. And I've gone down to here, generic PLA. This is some of my old changes. I'm going to discard those and make it nice and fresh here. So, yeah, and the other thing is, what nozzle have you got on? I've got a 0.4mm nozzle, so just put that in, and then you can close that, and that's just all. Once that's set, you never have to change it unless you're changing nozzle or filament. So over here you've got some settings. Now these will make more sense when we put something in the machine. What I might do is open up a file now that I've already got saved. So I go to File, Open Files, and I've got my little 3D printer selection. I've got loads of different ones on here. So I'm going to go for what's something that's nice and... Okay, so we've got something called the Cali Cat. This is a calibration cat. It's basically a cat that people use to help calibrate the machine. But it's a nice one. So we've got the little Cali Cat in here. Now I can look all around it. Remember, I'm using the right click for this. Right click and move the mouse. And then to zoom in and out is the scroll. Now, if I left click on the object, I can move it around. I can also, over here, this is called scale. If you wanted to increase the size, you only have to change one of them, and because, oh actually I've taken it off, but you can do snap scaling. Whoops, I've made it too small. So snap scaling, it will size it all up in order. So if I do 150 in there, and then press go, and look, now it's 150%. But let's put it back to 100%. And that's, these two settings means it will be uniform, so they'll all increase in the same way, and snap scaling. Whereas if you wanted to change something, just one part of the XYZ axis, you can take off snap scaling and do it individually. You've got rotate, so you can drag these and rotate the item. Be careful you don't lift it off the bed, because otherwise it will print in midair. So that, I think that blue there is telling me that it's actually in contact with the bed, which is good. Mirror, I have never used that. Don't know what that is. Support blocker, don't know what that is. What's this? Oh, these are like lay flat. You can sometimes keep switching around. Oh, it's not really working on this one. Anyway. But yeah, you've got your move. They're the basic things. So, and then I can just hear that one of my prints has finished over here. Oh, look at that. Anyway, I'll come back to that later. So, then you come down into these settings. Now there are loads of different settings on here, so you can literally search load. You can also go up here, and I think maybe not. Anyway, so there's a couple of key things when you're doing the settings. So first thing is the quality. So this is how thick the layers are, I think. Yes. Generally, standard quality is fine. Sometimes you'll increase it to dynamic quality if you're doing fine detail, but generally keep it on the 0.2 millimeters. If you're making things that the trouble is it will slow things down as well. If you make the lines smaller, then they're going to have to take longer to build up. And I don't know, potentially make it weaker as well because you've got more join points. Depends how you look at it. So that's the quality. This bit's an important bit. Infill density. So this is how much it's going to fill in the solid parts of the object. 20% is a good kind of starting point. If you wanted something to be really, really, really strong, you would do it 100%. But yeah, 10%, 20%, if it's just literally, it's not load bearing, which PLA generally isn't going to be particularly load bearing. But if you had something like ABS or what have you, you might want to make it 100% if you're making it to be super, super tough. This setting tells you what kind of way you want that infill pattern to be. And if I come out and show you on here, types of infill pattern. And if I go on images, see, this is a good example where it shows you all the different types. I think some of these actually label it. Yeah, so you've got like all these different ones. I tend to use cubic or grids. I think, anything that's in a cube shape is generally quite strong. So yeah, I tend to use cubic. But yeah, material. Okay, so this bit here, as a standard, I always have my Ender 5 Plus set to 200 and on the nozzle and 60 on the bed. Now this should then transfer all of these details over to the printer and force the printer to be at those temperatures. But one thing I would say is when the print starts, just double check that it has transferred that, because sometimes it doesn't happen. So that's the printing temperature. But for PLA, just keep it at 260 on this machine. It's working out really well for me. If you were changing the type of material like ABS and stuff, you will have to change those, and I have no idea yet because I haven't figured it out myself. Cooling and stuff, just leave it at the set things. I think this is talking about like putting a fan on. Yes, you do want the fan on. You do want it, 100%. I've never changed any of those. Now this is an interesting one. Generate support. So when you generate support, if you've got something that's got fine details, like on this design, this little tail, it's pretty fine. It's hanging out there on its own. So, and you think of how the machine is having to try and do that in midair. Anything with overhangs and so on, you might want support. You got to think that the printer can't print in midair. So I go on here, support everywhere. You can do it just touching the build plate. I generally do everywhere. Some people like to reduce the amount of support that they're applying because they may think it's wasted material, because what happens at the end of the print is you literally break off those bits of support and then you're left with the print. I think you're actually more likely to waste material if the print fails. So, if you feel like you need support, if it's something like I've just printed one of these, this to me doesn't need support. You can see how the printer's gonna deal with that. It's gonna be fine. It doesn't need support in there. But other things I have printed with support, just as an extra thing to prevent it failing, basically. So put that everywhere. So that's the support tab. Build plate adhesion. Now this is something I also use quite a lot. So a skirt will only give you effectively like a little rim around the edge, and it's handy having that because you can then look to see, is that first line going to print well? And we'll come to that later, how you want to get, how I mentioned how you want it, you don't want the filament coming down like that, you want it just a little bit squished on the plate. The one I like to set is a brim. The brim will give you several layers around the edge of this and create a little life raft for it, which also helps the item stick to the plate. And again, it's almost, I think it's a great way to start the print on a continuity of plastic, not straight onto a glass on its own. And if there's going to be errors, I always watch the first layers, and you will see if it's not right, and then you can cancel. I always do a brim. You know, it's not going to do any harm, and then you can change the number of lines that are in that brim. So basically, how wide out is the brim going to go? You know, fewer lines, it would be closer to the object. Dual extrusion, ignore that. You don't have a dual extruder. So they're the main things. Now the other things that you might find you need to use. So if I right click on this and I said I want to multiply the selected model, and I'm going to go number of multiples 1. Oh, where's he gone? Right, so I've got my other little kitty here. Can I rotate? Oh shit, oh god, no, I fucked it. Well, can I snap to plate? Oh no. Right, get rid of that one. We can do edit, undo, maybe. Undo. What is that? Control Z. Alright, so try again. Multiply selected. Add 1. Move. Oh, I'm in the wrong setting, that's why. Hang on. There, I've made the issue. Alright, we'll start again. See, it's all a bit up in air. Right, the reason that was happening because I wasn't on the right setting over here. You need to go into move, and now I can move these guys. Right, so I've got my 2 little kitty cats, and I want to print 2 of them at the same time on the same bed. You know, it's more efficient. If you want to leave your printer overnight, you want to be printing several in a go. I mean, probably don't do this when you first start up, because your print might fail and you've wasted a whole load of filament. But if you are doing this, so what I tend to do is I search in here, sequence. Here we go. So it comes up with a special mode. There is a whole list somewhere else in the settings that gives you all the different profile settings. You're not going to need to use all of these, the ones that I've found that I've used. So if you were to be on all at once, what will happen is as the printer is trying to make these, it will do a layer here, a layer here, a layer here, a layer here. And that's not great for continuity. You'll find that a mistake will happen. You'll get drift or what have you. Whereas if you do one at a time on here, then it means that it will do one first, finish that, and then move over to the second one. And the reason it's got this little thing around it is to, you know, you generally want to move them further away from each other, that they're not, I mean, you definitely don't want these darker bits of grey overlapping, but these are actually fine. The other thing is if you have prints of different heights, you may get a problem where what it does is if you look at this little box here, sometimes what happens is it artifactually moves the height of the box down, and it will give you an error reading. Let's see if it does it. If I press slice, which is this bottom down